Now, I'd like to move on now to what happened after the Second Vatican Council. A new Mass was introduced in 1969. Did Vatican II lead to the new Mass?
Yes. Vatican II, I was saying, put man at the center and place of God. And the essential thing about the new Mass is that it puts man at the center in the place of God. The various aspects of the new Mass and all the respects in which it is different from the old Mass can be summed up like that. For instance, the two most obvious examples that strike everybody walking into a church. One, the priest facing the people so that everybody can see his face, so that he's in contact with the people. Whereas he used to have his back to the people and his face towards God, towards the altar, towards the cross and towards God. So that the priest was God-centered, and the people going through the priest's back, so to speak, were also God-centered. Their minds and thoughts did not stop at the priest, but went through the back of the priest, to his hands, to the host, to the chalice, to the cross, to God. On the contrary, the new Mass, the priest faces the people, and therefore the attention and thoughts of the people come to the priest, and they stop at the human priest. Similarly, the language, Mass always used to be in Latin. The language in which Mass is celebrated is not the most important feature of the Mass. Better the old Mass in English than the new Mass in Latin. The language is not essential, but nevertheless the language is something that very much strikes people. And instead of being in Latin, which was the old and dignified language for 2,000 years of the Church, and therefore, so to speak, in that respect, a language of God, now the priest turns around and talks to everybody in the language of television and newspapers. The translations are cheap, shoddy English, cheap street English to make everybody feel at home. Everybody feels at home, but they don't feel with God anymore. They're with man, they're amongst men, it's a human get-together. Howdy, folks. Don't call me Father, just call me Joe. We're here to have a Eucharistic picnic together. We're all going to have fun, aren't we? And everybody has to sing out, yes, 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 Joe. And that way, everybody has a man-centered Eucharistic picnic instead of a God-centered sacrifice.
So the new Mass represents a whole different way of thinking.
The new Mass is the modern world, which is centered on man and which leaves God completely out of question. The old Mass was the old world where men center on God if they wish to save their souls.
Are there any specific doctrines that the new Mass undermines?
4, principally, but they're major doctrines. Firstly, the real presence. In various ways, the new Mass undermines the real presence. For instance, an acclamation immediately after the consecration. Some people will say that the new Mass in Latin doesn't undermine in the same way as the new Mass in the vernacular languages does. It's true that the new Mass in Latin is less incorrect than the vernacular languages, than the new Mass in the vernacular languages. But nevertheless, the omissions in the Latin are still grave and point in the same direction. Firstly, the downplaying and shading out, the phasing out of the doctrine of the real presence, namely after the consecration of the species of blood and wine, you have really present the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our Lord Jesus Christ. Secondly, the phasing out of the real sacrifice, because if Jesus Christ is not present in the beneath the species, then he's not being sacrificed. What's going on? There's no sacrifice. If there's no real presence, there's no sacrifice. If there's no sacrifice, if there's no divine sacrifice, if the Son of God is not being sacrificed, then the priest is no longer a sacrificing priest. So the third doctrine that gets phased out in the new Mass, even in Latin, on its way to being phased out, that the new Mass, even in Latin, is on its way to phasing out, is the doctrine of the sacrificing priesthood, the Catholic priesthood, the priest distinct from the people. The priest ranked above the people to his responsibility, for which he will answer when he appears before God, but he is ranked above the people by God's choice. And then fourthly, the doctrine of the Blessed Mary ever Virgin. That the mentions of Blessed Mary ever Virgin, I think, are mostly gone in the new Mass.
Similarly, the mentions of sacrifice are mostly gone.
Yes, even in Latin, that's phased out. So that you can try to say that the new Mass is not as dangerous in Latin as it is in the vernacular languages, and the translation from the Latin into the vernacular was the excuse for the liberals to go hog wild in their destruction of the Mass. But the truth is that even in its Latin version, it's moving in that direction, by the omissions at least, and therefore even the Latin version is downgrading these key Catholic doctrines.
So, in essence, then, there were problems in the new Mass right from the very beginning. It's not a matter that abuses crept in afterwards.
No, it's just like, as you were saying a little earlier with the Council, everything is there in the original text. Now, the original text was designed with diabolical skill, so that if, for instance, Michael Davis will say, but there's nothing positively harmful in the text of the Novus Ordo Mass in Latin. But harmful goes much wider than what he calls there, what he understands there by positively harmful. All of these omissions, all of these tendencies are harmful. And once you launch a tendency, it's going to finish up in sheer apostasy. And the tendency towards apostasy is in the text of the Latin Novus Ordo Mass.
Could you maybe compare it to a car that one might buy and take it off the lot, and immediately as you start driving it, it starts to rust and break down?
Yes. Let's say it's a car with the screws loosened. I'd adopt that comparison. Now, a car with the screws loosened may drive perfectly well for a few miles, but then a few more tens of miles or a few more hundreds of miles, the screws will start falling out. All of the screws will fall out by the wear and tear, and in the normal course of life, the car will fall to pieces. In the Tridentine Mass, all the screws are tightly screwed in, and it will not for that reason fall to pieces. But with the Novus Ordo Mass, the screws have been loosened, the screws of these great Catholic doctrines, the real presence, the sacrifice, the sacrificing priesthood, Blessed Mary of the Virgin, all of those specifically Catholic doctrines have, for the sake of pleasing Protestants, been loosened, and loosened in such a way that several miles down the road, the Mass will completely fall to pieces, which is what the new Mass was designed to do. The new Mass was designed not to be a stable replacement for the old stable Mass. The new Mass was designed to be, even in Latin, an unstable replacement for the old Mass. Therefore, it's not a replacement. It's a Mass on one side and a slide on the other. You've not got an old Mass and a new Mass. You've got an old Mass and a new slide. It's designed as a slide, and in its nature, it will slide.
So you could say then that it was structurally unsound right from the very beginning.
Absolutely, yes, definitely. It's structurally in the sense of intrinsically. It's intrinsically unsound, intrinsically tending towards apostasy, even in its Latin version.
Now, will a Catholic that attends the new Mass gradually then have his beliefs in the doctrine of the Church undermined?
Definitely. That's why the new Mass has turned millions of Roman Catholics over these last 30 years into Roman Protestants. And the official church is now filled with the Roman Protestants. If it walks like a Protestant, if it talks like a Protestant, if it quacks like a Protestant, it is a Protestant. And many of these poor Catholics are walking and talking and quacking like Protestants. To all effects, they are Protestants. But they think they're Catholic, and their quote-unquote priests are still telling they're Catholic. And therefore, it's easy for them to be confused and to be deceived. But they're doing and thinking and talking exactly like 50 years ago Protestants did and taught and thought.
Now, would you say then that the new Mass represents a break with tradition?
Yes, clearly. That's exactly what Cardinals Ottaviani and Bacci said in the famous Ottavian intervention.
And that applied to the new Mass as it was originally promulgated?
In Latin, yes. The Ottaviani intervention was drawn up by a team of Roman theologians, and finally two cardinals in Rome put their signature to it, Cardinal Ottaviani and Cardinal Bacci. And that Ottaviani intervention, as it's called, it's quite short, but nothing has matched it ever since. It denounced right from the beginning in the Latin text that this was a striking departure from the Catholic theology of the Mass. That was the conclusion of the Ottaviani-Bacci intervention. And this was talking about the Latin version of the Novus Ordo Mass, not the vernaculars. It's a striking departure from Catholic theology.
Now, you can say then that a revolution has occurred within the liturgy. Has all of church life been affected by this revolution? Have the liberals left any stones unturned?
I don't think so. There was announced from Rome recently, for instance, they were changing the 14 stations of the cross. They were cutting out 6 stations of the cross. I think those 6 which are not to be found in Scripture. They were using the Protestant measure for even the Catholic devotion, so ancient and honourable as the 14 stations of the cross.
So there's an example where they're doing away with tradition.
Yes. I mean, 14 stations, the 14 station way of the cross is Catholic tradition, certainly, part of Catholic tradition. And they wanted to change the words of the Our Father. They want to change the words of the Hail Mary. There's nothing that these innovators, as you might call them, leave untouched. They want to, quote unquote, renew, change everything.
What areas of change do you think are the worst?
Doctrine, for the reason we started with, namely, doctrine is basic to the Catholic teachings about the nature of God, the nature of man, the nature of heaven, the nature of hell, the nature of judgment, the nature of mortal sin, the nature of grace, the nature of Jesus Christ, the nature of the redemption, the nature of the cross, the nature of the Mother of God, the nature of Satan. These teachings about the nature of things are the very basis of the Catholic faith. And so if you tamper with those basic teachings, there's no way, if you tamper with the basic ideas, there's no way in which you can rearrange the furniture that's going to make it succeed.
So the new catechisms are a problem then of a very serious nature.
The catechisms which falsify the faith are, I would say, the gravest of problems, yes. Of course, the liturgy, to tamper with the liturgy is also immensely grave, because that's how most Catholics meet their religion and live their religion, at Sunday Mass. Therefore, if you tamper with with that, where they meet and where they learn and where they absorb their religion, you're going to tamper with their religion. But the Mass is not actually the root of the problem. The root of the problem is these doctrinal changes. God is not who we've always said he is. Jesus Christ is not whom we've always said he is. The redemption is not what we've always said it is. Baptism is not what we've always said it is. We're changing the nature of all of these things in order to make it easier for all men to get together. That is deadly, absolutely deadly, for the real Catholic faith and the real Catholic Church.
And this has happened right in Rome. It's not just some abuse in some diocese.
This is coming down from Rome, yes.
Now, how would you, in a nutshell, describe what has happened since Vatican II in the Church?
Man has put himself in the place of God. In a nutshell, that's it. In the modern world, ever since the Renaissance and the Reformation, man has been putting himself in the place of God. The Catholic Church resisted, and for the last 500 years, the Catholic Church has kept God in the place of God, or the last 400 years. But then from Vatican II, the Catholic Church said, okay, let's give up. Not the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church men were tired of resisting the modern world. You want man in the place of God. Okay, well, even in the Catholic Church, let's put man in the place of God. With Vatican II, the Church finally decided to follow the world instead of going on forever resisting the world.
So it was going along to get along.
Going along with modern man in order to be popular, in order to be worldly, in order to be accepted, in order to have money, to have fun, to have whatever the world offers. Yes, going along to get along.
And didn't the closing speech that Paul VI made at the Second Vatican Council, didn't that very much stress the importance of man?
Yes, I don't remember the exact words, but again, it was ambiguous. There was always an acceptable sense in which you could interpret his words. But if some Catholic bishop had spoken those words 20, 30 years earlier, he would have probably been sharply reprimanded and hauled up by Rome for saying things which smacked of heresy. The way in which Pope Paul VI expressed himself smacked of heresy. It wasn't heretical. You could always give it a good interpretation, or usually give it a good interpretation, but nevertheless it was moving in the direction of heresy.